Well, let's start then. So welcome to this shark session. Actually, I would like first to thank all of you because for attending this session. I know we are, experimenting a kind of a weird period, so it's not easy to focus on other topics than the coronavirus. So many thanks for your interest and participation to this session. And special thanks to the speakers, to our speakers, and to the RDA organizers that have made this virtual session possible. And so I am Laurence Mabille. I am one of the co-chair of the Shark interest group. So Shark is for Sharing Rewards and Credit interest group, and I'm from Public Health Research Unit at the University of Science in Toulouse, France. And I will be chairing this session with Romain David and Alison and Anne, who are also speakers, and they will introduce themselves in due time. Thanks for this. So a few practical information to start with. So the session is recorded, so if this is a problem for you, please let us know. A collaborative session note has been set up as a Google Doc. You can find the link in the chat or in the virtual program. And I invite you to open this document as soon as possible because we will be using it several times during the session. Thanks. And now to make the session run easier, this is how we suggest you will participate. So if you have any questions or comments on the session at any time, you can obviously express them orally, if not too many, but you can simply write them in the chat. We'll have a look at it all the time. If you do not speak, please mute your microphone. I can do that as well. Also, we would like to have your name, affiliation, email, and country in at least in the Google Doc for the session notes. So please do that. And we will use this Google Doc for collecting your answers during the session. So that will be useful for that. And feel free to add any remark or opinion into this document because it will serve as for the report afterwards. Okay, so now briefly how the session will be run. So right after me, Romain David will have a brief, will make a brief background of the session. Then two parts. Part one, the large part dedicated to identifying literacy vectors and tools with two invited speakers, Alison and Guru, and an interactive discussion around defined questions that you can see here regarding communication, regarding providers, training providers, communication support, rewards. And then the part two on ethical considerations that will be chaired by Anne, who will give a short talk as well. And to end, wrap up and perspective, hopefully. Okay, so now let's go straight to the heart of the topic. So the objectives of the session are to initiate a work with you to identify relevant communication and education channels that we call vectors that are needed to increase fair literacy. So that includes considering the form of communication for the message, its attributes, so the tools, considering the acknowledgement that the message has been received and understood, and if possible, key content of the training tools. Also, the objectives are to identify potential associated rewards and to start addressing underlying ethical considerations. So now I give the floor to Romain. It's all yours for the background.
Yes, so The background of the session is that the optimization of data reuse, the reproducibility of research, and the openness of research results, if possible, are inseparable part of research integrity. So identifying the requirement for fair literacy in support of the emerging practice around the verification of research data and services is a key step for open science development. But better defining the literacy of fair, it will be possible to bestow rewards and credits incentivizing fair skills, those as accreditation of competencies, award for support persons recognition, for conference organizers, for trainers, diplomas for trainees, and so on. So this is links and this has profound ethical roots that needs to be fair, be part of fair literacy and training and being emphasis in an international context. So next last slide. So we have worked on the defining recently the different steps of verification, like a quality process that is shown in this well. Verification can be schematized as a doing well, describing iterative quality steps that needs to be approved by the community through the process. This schema displays the preparing and training phase as sine qua non conditions for pre-verification. The pre-verification processes must be community approved at each iteration. That needs lots of training form. And the verification steps, check and adjust implementation must be approved by the community before a new iteration. So that's things that we try to describe through the training processes. So it's okay for me, Laurence.
Okay. Are there any questions at this stage for understanding? Or can we move on with Alison and Guru? So I don't know. I'll let you introduce yourself. If you mind.
Yeah, no, not at all. So I'm the first of the two of us, and I can see that we're not quite right in our origin. It is a bit better on the chat. We both actually come from the University of Queensland and are both affiliated with the Terrestrial Ecosystem Research Network, which is an infrastructure network for ecosystem observatories. I won't say any more about Guru because he fulfills a much more important role there. I used to be involved right at the beginning of the Terrestrial Ecosystem Research Network, went away to France, and now I'm back in a much more casual, a lower level way. So I'm delighted to be able to speak tonight or this morning to you, because I became a member of the Shark Group when I was in France, and it's great to see it keeping on going. I've been involved with the, hopefully my screen will share in a minute. I've been involved with, oh, sorry, you've got to stop sharing.
I have stopped.
Ah, oh, that's
because
okay.
you're not...
I'm there. Are you there now? Can you see me?
Well, I can see that you are on the slides, on our slides.
Can you see my screen now? I can see my screen. Fair compliance.
Yeah, but these are not your slides.
Ah, I'm looking at my slides. Okay, so I'm share screen. I will share again. Ah, I see.
You have to choose, yeah.
I see, I chose the wrong one.
No problem.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, good, good, good. I was just doing the link for someone on the chat of your slides. Good. Okay, so I have been involved with Data One since its inception, or its public inception back in late 2009, 2010. And I thought for my contribution today, I could talk a bit about what they have done in response to FAIR and how that might relate to identifying literacy vectors, the how, and the tools, the what. And I've been greatly assisted by key contributions from the Data One team, now merged with NCEAS, the National Centre for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis, Amber Budden, Matt Jones, Mark Schilder, and their team. So I must acknowledge their assistance here, or their contribution. Now I'm trying to progress, and you know what? Aha, there it goes. I have to use a different arrow. Okay, so I'm going to start with a little bit of deja vu for most of you, which is, but I put it in as a reminder that back in 2016, when Wilkinson et al. Established the idea of FAIR, the FAIR principles, they did talk about a diverse set of stakeholders. Now, I personally don't like the term stakeholders. I think it's a bit too standoffish. I quite like actors or players, but we'll keep on using that term, and we can argue about the semantics later. So a diverse set of stakeholders, and on top, a concise and measurable set of principles. So they did, not exactly the same team, but it was led by Wilkinson again in 2008, expanded on the types of metrics that could be used to measure people's compliance with the FAIR data principles. That these, the metrics that could be used should be clear, realistic, discriminating, measurable, and universal. As many of you will know all of this, and so I won't dwell on this very long, but I do think it's quite interesting to look at how that actually gets achieved, because it certainly doesn't seem to be an easy path. Now, the background of why I might talk about Data One and why I'm interested in bringing some of their experience to bear today. As I said, they started in 2009-10 to be actually active. They're an American-based, National Science Foundation-based organization, but they had the aim of being global, making sure that they were interoperable because they were a network of repositories, a federation of repositories, and would improve the availability and accessibility of data pre-FAIR, in fact, but a lot of the aims are exactly the same. And they're a community-based organisation. In order to be a federation, you have to be. They have, in that time, become, as mentioned, global, but they have a large component which was involved with education, training, and they used various vectors or tools to communicate the idea of this federation and shareability of data across the world. They have 42 member repositories, and so are involved in repository measurement, as well as many data packages from small to large. So that's who they are. So I suppose they have been working on showing how FAIR is applied or has been applied to the various data sets in the Federation of Data One. And these are preliminary results updated earlier this year at an ESIP meeting that I've been able to share with you. But basically, this usual thing. I've got all of these check criteria on the left, as you can see here, and measuring them against findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, error, failure, success, and as you can see, it's a gradient scale. To the person who asked whether these slides would be up on the in a shared position, yes, I think they should be, and these links that I've got here will be much easier to get to. But there's a nice little GitHub site that they have been that they've shared with everybody to show how this might be happening. So the next slides are more the user end of that work that they've been doing, and they've obviously looked at the continuum. It's not a yes/no, it's a continuum, and the colours relate to the following graphs that I'm going to present. And so, for example, in data one overall, remember this is applied to 806,000 plus data packages and several, was it 54 repositories or whatever it was. And there's, across the whole FAIR suite, they've assessed on a 0 to 100% scale how these data packages and repositories discoverable or stored in data one have comply. And as you can see, there's a 52% overall compliance with the FAIR criteria. Findable is best, reusable is least, as you can see. Now, the Data One team has established, or was part of the same team, was involved in the establishment of ecological metadata language and Metacat. So they're kind of leaders in discoverability and also standards in the ecological field, which has been a struggling field, may I say, and I'm sure Guru will be able to follow in with that. It's not an easy field, very highly individual and heterogeneous. So they've had a bit of an advantage here because much of the data that's been ingested has been aligned with various standards fairly well, better than many other such organisations have been able to do over the time they've been in existence. It's interesting that recently they've been involved with setting up an Arctic data centre funded by the National Science Foundation. And again, they've now got 46% compliance here, a much smaller number of data sets and much less variable. But even so, the reusable component is rather low at this stage. Findable again, it's organised fairly well to start with, as I mentioned, but again, 46% compliance. Why am I presenting this today? And hopefully see how this might work and how this might lead to a discussion, hopefully. So because they've had such a long association with tracking some of these exercises, we've got they can do the FAIR assessment over time. And so for the Arctic Data Centre, for example, which started back in, and they acquired it, you can see where they started improving the curve up here. Started improving the curve. The loose association existed before they came in around 2016. The Arctic Data Centre has gone like that. Still, reusability has been largely untested. ESS Dive, the Knowledge Network for Bound Complexity, again a data repository. LTR, that's pretty tight, which is quite interesting. NCI and Pangaea has just started to come in. So they've been able to assess at various stages. So this is a sort of tool that they're looking at that may be involved. Okay, so how difficult was that? And I thought I had a title. Can anyone do this? Now, I've been interested in a little bit of the research that I've been doing for various people, including the Sharp Group and today, that there's a lot of ambitious ideas about stakeholders and the variety, and the EU Commission in 2018, which I believe Romain and Laurence may be referring to this week, today with this session, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different sorts of stakeholders at different levels of interaction with FAIR. I think that's pretty ambitious, but that's part of what we're talking about. Sansone et al. In 2019, again an overlap with the Wilkinson paper, she was one of the authors on the second paper, have suggested a slightly smaller suite of people, but even so, it's quite variable. Their level of interaction with data and responsibility for data is quite wide. But they're all supposed to have some role in FAIR. If I just take researchers, which is where I come from, I identify as an ecosystem researcher, I suppose, primarily, and I consider the researchers at various levels as being some of the major providers and some of the major challenges, but I know them best. their interaction with data depends on many things. So you really are, we really are opening a Pandora's box here if we're not careful. Work setting. Are these researchers in a research organisation, and CNRS is one, a university? In France they overlap, in other parts of the world they don't. Government organisation or department, that happens a lot in, say, Australia. Private business, NGOs. If research, then there may be a significant variation in whether these data providers work in the field, in a laboratory, genomics laboratory, a modeler, whether they're in an office monitoring hydrological equipment. Job type. Subject or discipline. As I mentioned, there is a list of many options, and this list is informed by some surveys done by Carol Tenapier. Repeat surveys, we're up to number 3, and we're doing a comparison of at the moment, me and a couple of colleagues are doing a comparison of 10 years worth of surveys of the community, and the disciplines and subject levels are many, and they really identify quite strongly, and their practice is quite strongly determined by their subject or discipline area, as well as their work setting. Career stage, there's a very big difference in data readiness, data use, data management skills, etc. So I'm presenting some challenges, I suppose, and we can get through these. But one approach, either in vectors or in tools, is unlikely to suit all. So how does one do it? For example, and here are some questions. Should all data providers be responsible for ensuring their shared data reach a certain fair standard? In which case, how can we help them do this? And of course, changing the environment, which I've got down in bullet point 3, may be enough. The incentive may be great enough. The rewards, the threats, the rewards, but tools in between is what the Sharp group is talking about. But is it as simple as maybe a data management plan or a data and digital objects management plan? And how do we provide for the range of scale in interface with these sorts of instruments? Should we advocate for formal support mechanisms? Is that really one of the roles that we should be doing? Or should those who mandate or advocate fair play an active role in support? Or is a change in environment enough? And so on. Now, as I mentioned, I'm talking about data one. One way forward might be, and this is the, the modern market structure, market response economics, is that the market will respond. And the Data One team in its third formation, they've had 3 phases, this is the third, has responded by setting forward a new proposal for Data One Plus, which will in fact help members of the community at various levels, and you've seen the sort of model that they're proposing, help them improve their faiриfication and fair compliance, give advice at all sorts of levels. They may even, I know they're proposing to even take over the data and help organise it as well. For a fee, potentially. It's not all, unfortunately, for the user's good, only research organisations can do that. But I go back to that question that I put before: is there some responsibility in some of the advocates of the fair procedure to help support this sort of stuff, or is it going to be user pays, or it may not happen? So, but because we all want to get to the point of sharing our toys, sharing data, making sure we can reuse data and do all the things that we would like to. So that's the end of my talk, and I hope it's useful for encouraging some discussion and some, I suppose, broader perspective of where we are today. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. I guess we can take time for a few questions now, but then we can also have a discussion after Guru's presentation. Maybe that would be more appropriate. So if no urgent question, I will move on to Guru.
But I make a small comment of kind of apology in a way, because as Laurence mentioned right at the beginning, for those people who are here, explanation and context. This has been a really interesting process to get this put together. And meeting face to face, I think you'll find we may not be as well aligned as we might have been if we were face to face, but we will see how it works. And as Laurence has said, and thank you to everyone who's listening, this is a bit of an experiment, and it's great to be able to be part of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Alison.
Everybody can see my presentation screen.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Not on a presentation mode though, but
not in a presentation.
it's not very important.
Now we can see in the presentation mode.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so thanks for the opportunity to provide a talk. So today I will provide a bit of a perspective on the how the skill development program is emerging in time. Just to provide a bit of an history, and then how we are working, and then provide quickly some of the Australian perspective as well, the overarching. So TURN is a national collaborative infrastructure project. Basically, it's a national infrastructure to collect and publish the terrestrial ecosystem data across Australia. So as part of the TURN, so we do the observation at a different scale, at the continental scale, at the regional scale, and high intensive observation at the local scale, and then make all those data available. So we also collect data from the state government agencies, especially the plot-based ecological data, and make that available as part of the infrastructure. So most of our data is available from the portal. So we are part of the member node of Data One, as Alison mentioned. So it is, a lot of, most of our data is also discoverable from the Data One as well. So when TURN started almost like a decade back, it was a fair bit of a change management, the open data, make the data available, and then make it in an openly accessible format. That was a fair bit of a work done in that aspect. So when the TURN started, the skill development was not like a funded activity, and there was no explicit funding available to run an educational program or the skill development program kind of a thing. So when we make the data available, and then we look at, okay, now how effectively to use the data, then we saw that, look, how can we, so we make the open data, and how can we transition from the open data to the open science kind of a thing. So what we mean by that is, if somebody wants to do some analysis of our data, and how can, we can provide infrastructure where they can share that analysis with the people, so that that can be accessible from the wider community. So what we thought that is, focusing on that, and then build an educational program based on the analysis aspect side of the thing, how to use our data and what are the things you can do with the data would be a useful component side of the thing. So so basically what we are trying to do is, bring the, the data and then the bit of a computation as a platform together, and then they build the training component around it. So to build a platform, it is a bit of a challenging thing. so what we are trying to do is, if somebody do analysis, to sharing that analysis is culturally, it's not a very common thing. At least nowadays it is, because most of the journal articles wants it. And then so one of the thing is we found is if you want to make this as a thing, that you need like build in like an integrated infrastructure where the data and then the compute sit together and make that available, kind of a thing. So one of the thing what we worked on is that we want to build an infrastructure where basically if you run an experiment at the same hardware at a certain time, so basically you should be able to run the same experiment and the same infrastructure at a different time, kind of a thing. So basically the dependencies, for example, you run on a Windows, you run on a Linux, or the versioning changes, it changes the complete result. So we wanted to minimize that, kind of a thing. So we built like a cloud platform for that one. So what we did was, so basically it should be accessible everything from a browser, just to enter, just to make the lower the barrier of entry. And then if you have a AF is the Access Federation for all the education institute in Australia, and then we provide the Google OpenID login as well. And then we provide an infrastructure. It's a virtual desktop and infrastructure with all these tools. The tools basically, we can add as many tools as we want, depending on the users. We add these tools. So basically, what it provides is, somebody can log in, and then basically, they can bring their data, and then we provide some of our data as well as like a folder available in this infrastructure. They can do their analysis and they can share with the other people as part of the infrastructure. So somebody can log into the same infrastructure and then they can rerun their analysis. So, and then this infrastructure basically helps in a fair bit of a thing. So basically you can use this infrastructure in the teaching, and then the rerun the training aspects of thing. And then we have used this even to run a workshops in the conferences and everything. So overarching, what we want as a part of this is like in a turn perspective, we want this, for any data set we have in a turn. So we want to harmonize at every different level. So for every data set, there should be a data skill component to it, which shows that how to use this data, and that is accessible from a platform. So basically we can put it as a part of the, link all our GitHub thing so that, they can open the Jupyter Lab and then they can pull that and then they can run the analysis, kind of a thing as well. So everything as a managed infrastructure. They don't have to install everything, all the packages and everything. It comes with the managed infrastructure, kind of a thing. So we are moving towards that. So purely from a practical perspective of how do we upskill the community, and then they make the sharing of the analysis and then the sharing of the code as a norm, kind of a thing. So just to provide a bit of a perspective on from an Australian perspective, so all part of the the NCRIS family. So there's a different people who provide the infrastructure. So we reuse a lot of infrastructure provided by the different organization. For example, the ARDC provides the cloud infrastructure. The underlying networking is provided at the RNet. And then we build a data infrastructure. All the different organizations build data infrastructure on top of this, kind of a thing. So once we even realized that, look, why don't we work as at the community level? There are different projects, and then build a bit of the shared infrastructure with the shared skill development program, so that can be reused, and then it scales well as well, kind of a thing. So as part of that, we in a couple of years we worked with the ecosystem and ecology community to build the eco cloud. So basically it's a domain specific cloud. So bring the lot of data, so build a common data integration platform, and then provide a managed platform, compute platform as part of that. and then they have a exclusive EcoEd program where we all contribute the training materials. So it's quite modular, where you can use the training materials right away in your university courses, in your training, and then even in the workshops kind of a thing. So it's a quite integration of using the infrastructure and then the using the data, and then as a reusable component side of the thing. So link as part of the infrastructure. So this program is quite successful, and then it is very, so now, in the Australian context, fair bit of a domain are working in this pattern. So basically build as a common data infrastructure, the platforms, and then build a training component around it so that it's easy to scale, easy to manage. There's a fair bit of an input comes, and then a lot of people contribute to that. There's a recognition that it's almost impossible to build everything alone, kind of a thing. Just in the interest of time, I want to acknowledge my team, and these are the links which is useful for what I talked about. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Guru. Are there any questions to Alison or Guru at this stage?
Just Guru, can
Romain,
you provide a link to your presentation in the Google Doc session? Because,
I will make that available. Thanks.
Romain, do you see any question in the chat?
No question in the chat for the moment.
Okay, so then we'll move on with our first task, as we call it. So Romain, I'll leave it to you.
Okay.
If you're ready.
I'm ready. So the first task objective is to respond to the question: who are the appropriate providers on target for each communication and educational support? The idea is that each participant of the session will choose a provider, one or more provider category, and they will try to imagine which targets they will try to train and with which communication or educational support. So for the category of providers and targets, we choose European Commission actors list, but you can give another name if you are not agree with this kind of category. And it's the same for communication and educational support. We tried to list different kind of support on the educational and communication supports. But if you have other suggestions in the form or in content, you can suggest them. So all this work will be done in the next slide. Laurence?
Oui, sorry.
So all the work will be done by every participant in table 1 in the session document. First, you will choose your involvement in the table 1, and in the second column you will choose your targeted audience, and in the third column you will choose describe an appropriate support for each target. On the next slides. So the objective is to prioritize after the best support for your targets. So we suggest to add a number after your support suggestions, like in the example that I write on the top of the table. And after you can try to identify main contents for this kind of support, for each kind of support, by keywords, appropriate keywords. The idea is to to find all the different view of participants on a session, on training, on what is the most efficient. And if we have time, we'll try to specify which elements you think do influence the way that the messages are understood by trainees. And that is not in the table, that is after the table. So feel free to fill all these fields, and I think that we can take between 5 and 10 minutes for everybody to do the work. So let's go.
So you suggest that we all go now in the table 1 of the Google Doc for
Yes.
session notes, and that everyone's tried to fill in the column of those tables as indicated in the slides. Meanwhile, we can discuss. I mean, if you have any questions, please do. No, we are there to help.
Okay, it took me a while to find where table 1 was. It's quite a way down on the agenda document.
Doc.
Yeah, it's there.
So maybe I shall leave this table on this. I mean, this classification on the screen. That might.
I might. If a link
participant names are added in the table, so you just have to put your roles, your targets, and spots.
Okay.
Is there any question? Does everyone understand what to fill in? Do not hesitate to ask.
Some people are beginning to work. So at this moment, there are 10 people that are filling the table.
Yes.
We wish more.
I have a short question. Sorry to interrupt. What is meant with coordination for or standard bodies? Can you give examples of those?
I had that in my, sorry, am I there? I had that in my PowerPoint, and standards bodies such as repository certifications. So it wasn't very clear in the, let me just get back. It wasn't very clear in the original document that came from the EU, but standards bodies such as repository certification, that's about all they say, isn't it, Rama? In the EU document, which
yes.
I do have, yeah.
And RDA could be seen as a coordination forum.
Yes, I had RDA, CoData.
CoData as well.
World Data System, Communities of Excellence.
Okay, thanks.
Kind of meta initiatives coordinating.
I was thinking for standards bodies as the Australian Research Data Consortium, which used to be the Australian National Data Service. Well, part of it used to be that, which made the decision, for example, that we would only do CC by 4 in Australia. So I guess that's a standards body, was a recommendation.
Yeah. It's kind of flexible.
The standard body is the OGC, and then W3C.
Of course.
So basically, who create a standard for the data exchange, and then the ISO standards, and those are the standard bodies.
So, and GBIF, I suppose. No, TABWIC and GBIF, yeah.
Yeah, TABWIC, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I guess W3C as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I encourage all people that are not writing in the tables to do it, because the session will be based on your input. So it's really important if you do not do the work at this moment to participate, please. Actually, we are more than 10.
That's good.
Yes, but could be better.
It's quite a lot of things to think, though.
Yes, it's a difficult exercise, but I think that it's needed if we want to have an overview of all kind of supports and all kind of use of supports we can have in different cases. So after the table 2, that are elements you think do influence the message, we want to continue the work after the session, because it's not evident to do it only in this session. So please indicate if you are interested in the table 3, for example, in describing recommendations about this topic, and writing a paper, for example, or create a new area working or interest group. What you think?
Or just contributing to discussions.
Yes.
To meetings. Romain, I can't see the session notes right now because I'm in charge with the screen. So you have to tell me when you think we should fix a limit. I think in 5 minutes more.
Yes, again, 2 minutes, I think. After you can continue during the next presentations, and in 2 minutes we start again the presentations. Okay. So people are finishing their lines. Really great to see everybody working.
I guess it is not going to be possible to make a synthesis of it during the session.
Perhaps so I can try to prepare a slide, but if we don't have time, we will put it in the.
It is the beginning of the work anyway, so it will be synthesized as a report first, based on the Google Doc. So even if you have not enough time to fill in this part, you can still do it afterwards. You're very welcome. We can leave a few days more for people who want to contribute more.
The work is begun, so it's great. So with this input, we will build a graph to build the training landscape and share it with other groups that are interested in fair literacy, fairness literacy. Okay.
Is this a question? Sorry.
No. I think it's we can go further now. People's don't forget the second table. You have the contributions.
If you can, yeah.
And you wish to contribute.
If you wish to contribute, it's in the table 3.
Yes, and the table 2, it's element influencing understanding of messages.
It's written on the screen at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can still complete this document anytime after the session. We won't use the doc right after the session, so we'll leave some time, a few days, for that if you wish. So I'm afraid we have to move on, just to. So as part of the SHARC group, obviously we're interested in a rewarding mechanism for data sharing and the verification processes in general, but specifically today we would like to foster a bit of discussion on the form that rewards could take in the framework of fair training. The assumption is that rewarding in some way any fair training initiative will motivate people to do such work, which is quite a work, and will catalyze the implementation of these initiatives. But said that, is this true for all training providers, for all trainers? If so, which kind of rewards for which provider? For instance, for researchers, we can imagine that achieving a fair training activity could be included as an item in the career evaluation scheme, but this might not be appropriate for a policymaker, for instance. So what would you see as a rewarding mechanism in your role? Would you have any suggestions? Also for trainees, we can think of training diplomas, accreditation of competence, these kind of things. But again, it will depend on the content of the training, of what is expected. So do you have any experience? Do you know any rewarding that have worked or that you can imagine? So that's all these kind of things I would like to discuss a little bit. So that's should be about 10 minutes maximum. You can leave your ideas on the Google Doc. There is a dedicated place for this after task, the section task 2. So this is where you can leave any comment. But meanwhile, we can discuss that now in the chat or by talking. You're very welcome. So any idea, any comment? Romain, you have the eye on the chat.
Yes, for the moment, no question on this chat, but people are continuing to
that's good.
To fill the document, so that's a good thing.
No worry.
Perhaps, Alison, do you have ideas about all these questions on the task 2?
I have a question about table 2. I wasn't quite sure.
Okay, let me go back.
Table 2 means. Is that elements influencing?
That's table 2 is for which elements do you think do influence the way messages are understood by trainees?
Anne, can I ask something?
Sure.
Yeah, I actually sent this question through the chat, but then you just say there is no question. So, and it was exactly on the same topic as Alison on table 2. Frankly, I don't understand what elements means, and I don't understand what kind of message, what messages mean. What do you refer to with these two things? I felt unable to answer this or to fill in this table. Can you
But
just
the messages
give a
are
bit more? Yeah, what are messages? What are
messages are the
elements?
content of the training. So the objects, the objectives of the training and the content.
Okay.
So and the elements are anything, really anything that, according to you, could influence this capacity to understand the message.
Okay.
So Alison
so
had listed a few ones
whatever.
in her talk, such as it depends on many things, but it can depend on your own skills in data, for instance. In data science in general, it can depend on the subject you're working on. It can depend on the job it depends on many things, and this is where you're asking to contribute.
Could I say something, please? Putting
Yes.
my hand up. I was mindful of being a research educator, so I think the relevance of the message to the current task the person is doing really makes a tremendous difference. So, for example, I ran lots of courses on how to write your curriculum vitae, how to write a job application, how to write your thesis as a research director. And it went right over their heads until they were doing it. So the timing of the availability of information. So does that, to me, that's what I will put in.
Yeah.
So whatever message is there has to be able to be accessed by the person at the time they need it in a way that makes it live, be alive for them, and they find it. So maybe that will help other people understand. Is that what, I think that's what you mean, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a different way. Okay, good.
Actually, Alison, that was one of the points you raised in your mail.
Right, okay, thank you. No originality here.
Okay, so I don't want to stop the writing process, but if you have anything to discuss on the rewarding aspects, you're very welcome. Any comment? You can do that in the section task 2 of the Google Doc or in the chat.
For the moment, there are no things in the chat. Guru said that the data country model is very good as well. So perhaps you can explain that more, Guru.
Thanks, Roman. So the data carpentry is a very widely used model of training the. It's like a train the trainers model. So somebody trained, and then they became the trainer, and then the courses goes from basics to very advanced. For example, in data carpentry, there is a ecological data carpentry is there. So basically, how to manage ecological data. Okay, and then programming in Python, programming in R, using GitHub, and everything is a modular kind of a thing. So basically, it's a very hands-on training. You do the work, and then you become a trainer, and then you can train as well.
And
very structured way of training with all the materials. Everything is open source.
We ran the first one in France out of CESAR and FRB.
Right.
But
and did you find volunteers easily to do that?
We found it was politically very interesting because who has the responsibility for the training was very protected by by the institutions. So CNRS had their own, the organizations had their own. So the politics of the country may differ. But data carpentry is amazing. The people who came loved it. They were mostly early career researchers. But the politics of France at the time meant that it hit these walls of uptake. So you'd have to get at a different way. That wasn't a real answer to your question. Oh, sorry. But yeah, it was disappointing in many ways because it went very well, but no one really understood how to take advantage of it. But it does work well. So you can go, for the trainers, we had to go to Holland, to the Netherlands, it's on the back of my computer, to someone in Germany. And one of the postdocs of CESAB, the Synthesis Center in France, was a Canadian who was a trainer in data. There's another version for programmers, particular programmers, data software or whatever it is, but he was fantastic. So we got 3 trainers, but there were none in France at the time who were French.
And do you think that a formal reward would have helped to find more people to do that?
No, the people were fine. I think the hierarchy that we put in is very informative. So thank you for raising this and Guru answering and bringing this up. That's exactly it. It needed the institutional, I would say imprimatur. Is that a word in French? The institutional okay. So that there was no problem getting to the postgraduate students if only you could get through the institutional walls. So I think of Carcassonne and a walled city, and that was the way it was. And you had to get in the right gate. So when you have your hierarchy, when people are filling in, someone filling in as a funder or an institutional facilitator, and there's a young lady here who comes from Australia who is one of those sorts of people. If those people can say it's okay, then a little bit of travel money or a time off for the student could be provided. So that sort of reward. Data carpentry is not expensive because it's peer run, but there's a little bit of money, but everyone has to have the okay to go. You know, a day off, 2 days off.
Okay, that's...
the good thing about the model is, you can do as like a community learning. Assume that as a group, we want to learn, for example, Python programming. None of us have. They have a complete course. It's available on GitHub so that, we can sit together. They run like a complete, like an instruction thing as well. Sit together and then learn. And nobody can stop us doing that. So the main thing is like, everything is like a carpentry is like a community driven. It's a purely on the voluntary basis. Nobody expected to, like a paid job kind of a thing. So it's a very small staff. I think it started from US. It proliferated all across the globe.
Actually, lovely, because it started from, I know a couple of the people, and it came from a synthesis center, Nimbios, and the people associated with that, and another one, Chicago Museum. And that's part of this collaborative learning where you have you have this idea, because you do have the tools and a course online. So do have a look. We should put a link up for people to think of this as a model for FAIR, maybe. Maybe it's maybe maybe it is a strand of their teaching and we could provide it. That you not only learn from them, but you learn from each other. So you come along and you find someone is really good at something within Python, for example, or OpenRefine or R. And it's, you know, so you have a trainer, yes, but it's not like a formal formation in the French sense of a formation. You do get a certificate, which is another reward. You get a certificate.
Mm-hmm. I think there was another comment coming. Yes.
Can you hear me? It's
yes.
Sophie. Yeah, it was to go like Alison said. In fact, in France, the JB France members, we are 4, and we are usually organize a lot of trainings, and we wanted to be linked with data carpentry because they contacted us, and it's true that we didn't get so much support from our institutions in France. They say, oh yeah, but you already made a lot of them, you are going to do more and more, but not for France. So we don't really, or you can think about it if it's really national. But like Alison said, it was difficult. We organized a specific training for the museum, and we wanted to invite people from, it was for the PhD students, and we wanted to open it to others, CNRS, IND, and it was really difficult. So this is something we must really work on.
Yes.
At least in France, But I think it's going to be better because there is links with the all the Go Fair initiatives, and so things are moving slowly, and I hope it should be better in the next months and year now. Especially with all these groups, the RDA groups, Go Fair groups, who are linking together to show that it's important to raise all of these troubles.
Hopefully, yeah.
Sorry, I would like to maybe shortly share the experience in the Netherlands. I work for the 4TU Research Data Archive at TU Delft. And we are member of the Carpentries, actually, and it has been a really good way to engage PhD students with basic skills on data literacy, but also on code, so software. So we run periodically software carpentry workshops. We did that last year 4 times. And the main incentives was for them that they can get graduate school points. So we work together with our central graduate school and told them that we identify a big gap on code skills, and that we could provide this training through the carpentries. And they agree, and the students get 2 credit points when they come to the workshop, the full workshop. And then slowly we are also moving into implementing data carpentries under the same system. So the motivation for PhD students is credits. The motivations for instructors to become certified instructors is that they get the certification, and they can add this in their curriculum. Even some PhD students with advanced skills on programming or data skills wants to become certified instructors to add that into their curriculum.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But it has to be recognized by the school, the university. That's
the graduate.
It's difficult in France.
For the participants, the graduate school recognize the points. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks very much. I think we have to move on. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a last part on ethical consideration with Anne. So, Anne, are you ready? And you're very welcome to add any comment in the Google Doc, really, so that we will try to make something of it, for sure.
I'll add afterwards.
That's good. So I'll stop my screen.
So I will share mine, hopefully.
So this is now the part 2 of the last part of the session. Do you want to introduce
So
yourself?
let me see, share, partager l'écran. Yes. Let me just. The question is, do you see my screen or not yet?
I can't see yours actually. It's coming.
You cannot see mine. Okay, so that's fine. So hello all. Thank you very much to Laurence and Romain for having organized this session. They really worked for that. I will, well, present myself. I'm Anne Cambon-Thompson. I'm one of the co-chair of the Shark group, following activity about the rewarding of sharing for quite many years in the domain of biological collection and data. I'm a medical doctor by training, and I've been doing research in domain of immunogenetics, human genetics, and for a number of years in ethics of biotechnologies specifically applied to health. And I am working in the same team and unit as Laurence in Toulouse in France. And I'm attached to the CNRS. So that's enough for me. So I have, when we were preparing the session, we thought that it could be of interest to have something about ethics in the context of training related to FAIR and to sharing. So I will have a presentation with a number of things, just to start the discussion in a way about why ethics and what is it. And then the rest will be about ethics and deontology and the relation between ethics and research integrity, the place of regulation in this context and interaction between laws and ethics, which is depending on the country where you are. And then a reflection about the values behind the FAIR principles, and then some conclusion and discussion. So, why ethics and what is ethics in the first place? Well, I just went to different authors and classical or dictionaries. As you can see here, there are moral principles that govern a person's behavior or an institution behavior. So it's related to the action. Ethics is not just in the air, in the clouds, but it's something that you rely on in the name of what are you going to act. There are classical authors and theories. And finally, it's the study of what is morally right and wrong, if you can classify so strongly what is right and what is wrong. And in terms of philosophy, ethics is a branch of philosophy, as described here, but there are different levels where you can think of ethics, like normative ethics, applied ethics, and so on. So this is just to like, what do we talk about? When humans are at stake, and it's very important. It's important in terms of the kind of data you are dealing with. It's also important in terms of the rewarding. The rewarding is not for things, it's for human beings. So when we think about the reward, why do we want to reward? We can be very utilitarians because we want the people to act, and they act because they are rewarded. Or you can also call on values, and we will come back to that later. So in terms of when humans are at stake, of course, human dignity, it's in all possible international texts and human rights and fundamental freedoms. And you know, the period we are living with the COVID-19 crisis for the moment it's really showing in practice this balance between fundamental individual freedoms and the protection of, in that case, populations. And that's a good example in all our work. How much do we abandon, in a way, of our own freedom for solidarity, for protecting the human rights of other people? And this is true when we work with data. And of course, the autonomy, the privacy. Privacy is specifically important when you think about data, and certain kinds of data which are more sensitive if they are personal data. But there are also sensitive data which are not necessarily personal, and that would, in the end, should be treated with very much care. All these first 5 things about human dignity, human rights, autonomy, and privacy are very much directed towards individuals. But there are also the values of solidarity, the cost due to explicit with the duty to use. Oh, then I'm going to cut my video, if I can.
Yes, maybe yes. Can all do that.
I cut the video. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Go on, yes.
Yes, it's
okay,
much better.
It's better?
It's better.
Okay. I'm trying to make it. Is it okay now?
Yes, at the moment it is.
Okay, good. So of course, this principle I was referring to, and for people, it's beneficence and non-maleficence. And you can think of extending that not only to individuals, but to systems, to environment, and so on. But there are a number of important principles, like the scientific integrity. I will just come back to that in a few seconds. And transparency, the notion of responsibility, of proportionality, which is something very often called, and it's important in managing data to think about proportionality between what you do and the consequences. Responsible governance, and I think in a community like RDA, this is given a large importance, and it's true in many domains. Equity, inclusivity, and that's something in an international organization we put a lot of emphasis on. And then the public engagement, that the relation to the public, not only between communities, and of course, reciprocity. So with these slides, I just want to underline that very often people active in the domain of ethics are considered in 2 ways. Either they are very pessimistic, it won't work, it's too complicated, it's attacking the fundamental principles, don't do it, and so on, so the negative aspect. And the other side, which is they may be too late. They need to think, everybody needs to think deeply. And when you arrive all to knowing how to repair the door of the stable, then all the animals are running around. And they are very difficult to catch then back. So the balance between these 2 aspects can actually be influenced by interaction between the people in training or being directly concerned in their work by what is being thought about in terms of principles. Then when we are, and that's what we do in research, we are trying new things all the time. And at certain time, and it is specifically true for the moment in the COVID-19 crisis that everybody has in mind, you introduce a new application of a technology, for example. I'm thinking of using the phones and so on, but you don't know what are the real good guidelines to make it beneficial for the people and having as less bad sides as possible. And this moment between the red curve, which are knowing in reality what are the problems encountered when you do a specific action or introduce a specific technology, and the moment when you have enough evidences and knowledge to actually be able to decide what are the good guidelines, the good way to manage that, there is always this uncertainty period. And I think this applies also when we will try to think about rewarding. There are the other side of the coins, you know, that appears sometimes when you have not thought of. So this, what I call the evidentiary time lag, is extremely important and requires to be quite humble when you try new things. So that was what I just wanted to say. Ethics is rather large, as can be applied to many domains. Ethics and deontology, and we indeed, Romain talked about research integrity. And research integrity is, of course, very important in the domain of research, and calls for the responsibility of researchers. You can consider it as responsibility in the way the research or the management of data is conducted. And of course, there is also responsibility towards the society at large, not only our own work, scientific community, take their responsibility towards the persons taking research.
We're losing you.
I was alluding to autonomy and human being. So research integrity is part actually of, can you hear me now?
Yes, again, yeah. That's okay.
Yes, okay. Research integrity is part of the deontology of research, but with a strong embedment in ethics. And in terms of research integrity, the most known the most known statement at the international level is what is called the Singapore Statement, that was actually written in 2010, and many institutions around the world have adhered and adopted this statement in their own internal policy. So that's why I refer to that. It's international, so it's rather general. There are 4 principles: honesty in all aspects of research, accountability in the conduct of research, and all these apply perfectly in management of data and sharing of them. Professional fairness, courtesy in working with others. That is one of the rules in the code of conduct of RDA, for example. Good stewardship of research on behalf of others. And there are 14 responsibilities that are underlined in this Singapore Statement. And I will just underline research methods. So the methods we are using are, it's true for managing the data and for sharing them. The rewarding aspect is present with the authorship, the publication acknowledgement. Also the conflicts of interest are an important part. And it's not only fixed on or oriented, focused on the scientific community itself, but you have the institutional dimension, research environment. So there are duties for institutions or organizations, and societal considerations. So it's not only, it's important to share between us, but it's also important to think in relation with society in general. So that was what I wanted to say about ethics and deontology and the research integrity. The place of regulation, I only have one slide for that. It's to underline where ethics and law interacts or overlaps. And of course, this depends on which country you are in. And this slide is just to underline what binding instruments, so the rule of law, exist. It's true at national laws, we all know that, but there are, for example, European Union law, international treaties that apply, and then there are these non-binding instruments, and these are those we work on, we can act on. There are, of course, international rules, and I referred to the Singapore Statement, that is one example. In terms of medical research, you have the Helsinki Declaration, for example. You have professional guidelines, and that's where we can act as professionals in the data management. And then you have all in these non-binding instruments, but reference documents for the action. You have all the ethics bodies, opinions, recommendation, and so on. So this is just to make this link between what is the regulation and on the legal level.
Oh, we've lost you, Anne. And
the extremely important. I'm nearly finished. In training, it's important to have these two aspects well differentiated. So we are talking about fair and fair principles. And I just want to remind a sentence from actually an economist in the 30s who said innovation and wrote a lot about innovation changing the values onto which the system is based. So when we do new things, we introduce new systems, new technologies, new tools. This is not so to realize that in training, but in anything we do within our group. Ethics does not consist of a static set of theories or principles that can unproblematically be applied to any new situation. So rethinking, readapting is important. And for human beings, informed consent is not the key to everything. There are other aspects to consider. So this is part of a work being done presently in an European Union consortium called FAIR Plus. The aim of the consortium is to help research in the biomedical domain and biomedical innovation to share data and to make their data fair. So we have part of the work, and I will associate our colleague in the group, Alejandra, who is working on that. Let's think about what are the values behind this principle, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. And we try to match values worked in ethics or integrity of research and so on, and with each of the principle in the FAIR principle. And this table is just a sort of contraction of this exercise. For example, for findable, of course, the general overarching value is universality or principle, but you find there inclusivity, transparency, sustainability, also efficiency, and recognition, reward. That is in our group very important. So all these can be attached and are values and principles which are referred in many texts that I'm not going to enter in now, but that can be very precisely attached to this character of findable. Accessible, there is behind that the concept of responsibility. Of course, you don't make accessible any data thinking of rules for
just to say that the time is over.
yes.
We should. Okay.
Yes.
Just
Okay.
to mention
then
that the time is over. Okay.
You can finish and you will
No, you
see
can.
these slides. But this was just to give an example of what can be done, and it's done collectively in this ethics and principle. How does that apply to a certain domain?
Yeah, the connection
And
is
this
not
consortium
good.
has sorry. So
Sorry, I am sorry,
just...
Anne, but the connection is not good. Would you like to just to end your part and find out
that's the I was say that ethics should be parts, and I would like that we discuss that, of fair literacy training. In an international context, we have to rely on international text and declaration, and that's really relevant for RDA work. There are the necessity to think about what you introduce when in a training, according to the sequence of training and the modalities regarding ethics. When is the good time? And we have to face the difficulty to keep it close to actions. And I join here what Alison was saying. It has to be seen as concrete for people. The other difficulty is that we try to find solutions to issues that are encountered. At the same time, thinking, not just a list of tools to use to be in the right side. So finding the balance is important. And then we have to acknowledge, and that's the slide I jumped over, the diversity in positions and the diversity across the world on solutions, even if there is agreement on principles. And this is important in an RDA context where we are international. So now I have the discussion slide, which I think you got before, and should be the basis of the questions.
Yes.
So I stop now.
Yes, thank you very much, Anne. I'm sorry for this. I'm afraid we have to end up the session quite quickly because it's the time is over. So I suggest I just go back very quickly to go back to okay. So I guess the questions you were talking about, we will leave them in the Google Doc, and obviously everyone can comment on this if wished, but we'll come back to that. We'll find other ways to discuss the ethics considerations, which are really important, and we'll come back to it anyway. We'll need it. So I'm sorry, but I have to wrap up by saying that we'll try to. So this is a work that we initiate with you. So you, as Romain said, you're very welcome to tell us how you want to contribute if you want to. So you have a table in the Google Doc for this. I think it's table 3. We'll make something of this session quite soon and come back to you. It's the aim is to also to include this work as part of the SHARC recommendations we're working at for a while. So I think it's time to thank you, all of you, for your patience and your participation. And Romain, the last word with your poster.
Yes, we have built a poster for the poster session for this plenary. So I encourage you to visit our poster that is called Implementing Fair in Data Sharing. Who are the actors and what are their responsibilities? And if you have remarks or questions, don't hesitate to ask them on the website. And you can vote for posters until the 9th of April with the link that is here. and that we will copy in the session document. So thanks for every participant. It was a really rich session, and I'm really happy for the participation of everybody in the Google Docs session.